We welcome you into the Eagles pregame show brought to you by SeatGeek. Ben Goldstein, Sam Heine, and things look a little different for me because my computer stopped working, but we're doing this on the phone. We got to do what we got to do. And the Eagles, Sam, they're going to need to do a couple different things there. They want to get a win, but it's Black Friday. Hope we all had a great Thanksgiving. Sam, how are you doing?
Doing good, getting ready for a massive Eagles game. This was one at the beginning of the season when it was said that the Eagles were playing on Black Friday. Oh, that's really exciting, but it wasn't one that you thought would be as big of a game as it turned out to be with the Bears being as good as they have been this season. So, really excited for this one. Two 8-3 teams going at it. Two teams that are competing for the NFC's number one seed going at it. So, really excited for this one to get kicked off.
Yeah, real exciting one down at the link today. It's also super windy down there today, so that'll certainly play a factor. And something that we're going to need to pay attention to is some things that went wrong last week in Dallas. Last week we're calling it a disaster in Dallas, and it sure was a disaster. And so many things went wrong for the Eagles. And I would be able to read off my computer, but my computer's not even open right. It's not even. I got a black screen right now, so I can't even see anything. But lots of penalties that I think, Sam, you hopefully will have the agenda open to read off the stats. But Eagles, the penalties, for one, I think was the number one issue last week. And they had, 14 for 96 yards? It was a huge issue for the Eagles last week, Sam.
Yeah, like you said, blowing a 21-point lead. It's the first time since 2000 the Eagles have blown a lead that large in a game. So, obviously something you don't see every day, but a very disastrous, like you put it, loss in Dallas. And, you're right on the money there. 14 penalties for 96 yards. And, it's been a big problem for this team all year long. They've been, obviously none has, they haven't had as many penalties as they did last game in a single game. But, all season long, it seems like every time the Eagles get a big play, you're looking for that yellow flag to be thrown because something has gone wrong. Or every time Saquon Barkley finally gets a first down run, a yellow flag comes out because somebody did something wrong. And, it's definitely been one of the things that has really held back this offense. This team is a team that has not had a good offensive season so far, even though they are 8-3. So the fact that every time it seems like they, make a play, it's getting called back is definitely something that's not helping out the offense that is already struggling. And then, when you go last week as well, the turnovers, this team has been really good at not turning the ball over. But last week they had those two turnovers with Xavier Gibson and Saquon Barkley. Saquon's obviously is uncharacteristic from him. I like that they were trying to get him involved in the passing game last week, because he has struggled in the offensive line and just the running game as a whole has struggled so much and in the offense, in the running game. So, trying to get him involved in the passing game I like, but even then they turn the ball over. So, a lot of sloppy play, a lot of mistakes last week that some were uncharacteristic in the turning the ball over, some were very characteristic of this team so far. And, a couple times in the past we've seen some Nick Sirianni teams really struggle with penalties. I believe it was 2022, maybe 2021, one of those teams really early in the season. It was a big thing. The penalties. And Nick was able to get it turned around pretty quickly, but coming out of the bye week, you would have liked to see them not, have all these penalties and have all these mistakes and be so poor as an offensive unit in total. And coming out of the bye week, they've been the opposite of that. They've been very poor offensively, and now we're starting to see some, like I said, characteristic mistakes with the penalties and some uncharacteristic mistakes with the turnovers.
Yeah, that's for sure. Also, I got my computer to get up and back working, so we're ready to go. And a note for this game, we're going to get more into the Bears situation later as we go on. But Carl Cheffers is today's referee for the Eagles, and him and his crew are known for throwing more flags than any other crew in the NFL. Right. So the Eagles are going to be needed to be exclusively careful this afternoon if they don't want to get penalized and have more of the issues that they have been having. Anyway, another note is been this offense. We know how great this defense is. We thought the offense was going to be great this season. However, here we are. It's week 13, and the Eagles are 8-3. However, the offense has been has been very disappointing, and that continued into last week's game. 21 points, 192 yards, and 12 first downs in the first three drives. That was the best the offense has looked all season. Finally, the offense has shown up. Final 8 possessions, 107 yards, 7 first downs, no points. No, I don't understand how you go 3 drives of perfection and then the rest of the game, you don't score a single point. The Eagles, in their last 3 games, have had 10 points against the Packers, 16 against the Lions, and no points in the final 41 and a half minutes in Dallas. You're not going to win games like that. I don't care who you are. And this offense now ranks 25th in success rate. They're producing a positive play on offense at the same rate as the New York Jets. This is the lowest success rate of an Eagles offense through 12 weeks in the last 20 years. What is the issue? Are they going to correct it? Like, how do you assess the coaching? How do you assess Jalen Hurts? Like, there are so many questions with this team right now, Sam.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of everybody. I think when you look at last week specifically, I think something that gets a little bit understated, because of how much Kevin Pasula is under fire is that, when the quarterback is playing well, the offense looks good. You saw in the beginning of the game, Jalen Hurts was on fire. He was throwing it down the field. He had some great passes. The wide receivers made some adjustments, like AJ catching a ball that was a little bit behind him for a touchdown, but even so, AJ was so wide open, it didn't matter. And then in the second half, there's been this notion that the Eagles have took their foot off the gas, which I just completely disagree with. I mean, taking your foot off the gas means that you're running out clock, you're playing conservatively, all that kind of stuff. The Eagles did none of that. They threw the ball way more than they ran it. I believe that they threw the ball at a 75% rate in the second half. They took deep shots. Jalen just missed them. They still, when they had positive plays, they were called back by penalties. So I think they just were sloppy, and that's something that we've seen throughout, the history of the Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni era here offensively, is while they do win, just about every game they play, offensively, they're inconsistent. Jalen is an inconsistent quarterback, and the offenses, as a result of that, become inconsistent. And the biggest thing that has led this team since Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts have been here as quarterback head coach duo is the running game. And there's no running game this year. A lot of people, all the focus is on the passing game this year because we cannot run the football. And, even though this passing game is just about the exact same as it was last year, if we were able to run at the same rate we were able to last year, there would be absolutely no problem with it. Last year we were 29th in passing. This year, I believe we're 27th in passing. It's the same passing offense that we've seen ever since Jalen Hurts has taken over as the quarterback, and ever since Nick Sirianni has taken over as the head coach. The biggest difference is the offensive line and Saquon Barkley are playing terrible. And you said 25th in success rate, which is close to what the Jets do. It's just there's way too much talent on this offense to be able to play this poorly. And this isn't even me taking it off of Kevin Pasula's hands, but I just always think why. Why is the offense look like this? Why is there always hitch routes? Why do we not throw the football over the middle of the field? And the only reason I can keep coming back to is that they play, every offensive coordinator designs their offense into the strength of their quarterback. And you look back at the offenses of the last couple of years, while obviously they were a lot better because we were able to run the football, the passing game was the exact same. Everyone had the same problems. We didn't throw the ball over the middle of the field. The routes are simple, blah, 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 blah. It's the same problem over and over again. But I do think that Kevin Pasula, at the same time, he can get a little bit repetitive in his play calling, which leads to, some predictability, which a lot of people have definitely called out. So, long answer, but to basically say that it's everybody. It's the head coach. It's the offensive coordinator. It's the quarterback. And it's even sometimes the wide receivers. AJ Brown hasn't played as good as he has this year. And it takes everybody for this offense to work. And there's way too much talent for it to not be working like it should. And, at this point in the season, you just kind of gotta expect that it's just going to be what it is for the rest of the year. And hopefully it's going to be good enough to win some of these games down the stretch.
Well, I was hoping for some encouraging words there from you, Sam, but it's hard to find them, especially when the this run game is what it is. And you said that's the number one issue, and it is. You look back, you said it best. You look back last year at this offense, it's the same. However, there's just no run game. And when you don't have that, you're not going to win. Barkley last week, 10 carries for 22 yards. Once the Eagles took a 21-0 lead early in the second quarter, he had just 6 carries after that For the rest of the game, he had no yards. 22 rushing yards is the fewest with the Eagles. It's crazy. 2.2 yards per carry. 2.2. That's just not going to get it done. Barkley this season is averaging 3.7 yards per rush this year. It's 42nd among all running backs, and this would match the lowest of his career for a full season. Is it ever going to get better?
So, I think the only way it gets better is if the offensive line gets healthy. Cam Jurgens kept battling through injury. Lane Johnson obviously out. Landon Dickerson battling through injury this year. Jordan Mailata, who knows if he's battling through an injury, but he just has not played as well as he did last year. This offensive line has really struggled in the running game this year. And, I think some people are starting to come around to the fact that all those rushes have taken a toll on Saquon, because at this point, I think if you want to blame it all on the offensive line, I think that's unfair. If you want to blame it all on Saquon, I also think that's unfair. But I do think that these people and these national people, while I respect all their opinions, I disagree with them that Saquon hasn't lost a step, because it's impossible that Saquon hasn't lost a step. Because if you're going to say it's all the offensive line's fault of why Saquon has really struggled this year, then you have to say it was all the offensive line's fault, or the offensive line was all the reason why he was so great last year. Because if it's all the offensive line this year, then it has to have been all the offensive line last year. I'm not saying that I believe Saquon is, completely fallen off, and, his yards before contact numbers this year are insane, and you can just watch it. You can see it with your eyes. He's getting hit behind the line of scrimmage so often with so many holes, or with no holes, but also at the same time, you see plays like last week where he had a guy one-on-one with a chance to get a first down and he couldn't do it. So, it's definitely something, and I'm not saying that Saquon Barkley is going to be this way for the rest of his career, because so many times we see running backs after having, he almost has 500 touches last year. After having that many touches, they have a down year and then they come back and they're completely fine the next. But, it's clear that the offense, and the offensive play calling has lost a little bit of confidence in him and the offensive line, because, like you said, they barely ran the ball in the second half. And only 10 carries for the game. That's crazy numbers. So, it's definitely something that needs to get fixed if this team wants to do anything meaningful. Because, like we talked about earlier, this offense in the passing game has been what it's been for the last 3 years. Expecting it to be any different would be foolish, because they've shown us for 4 years exactly what they are. So, they need to get it going, but unless the offensive line can just wake up and be healthy one day, I don't know if they really are going to be able to.
It's just like, it's the offensive line, of course, but also me with Saquon, it's just like in the open field, just doesn't look as explosive. Like, They don't design plays with Barkley, like running out. Like, it's just like, it's weird. Because how do you go from the best running back season in NFL history to one of the worst that we have seen in a long time, especially with the Eagles, because the Eagles have had a lot of great running backs over the last 20, 30 years. Like, how does this happen? Like, it's just like, I don't love saying, like, how has this happened? Why is this happening? But, like, there's no great answer.
Yeah. I think a big reason, too, is that he's starting to lose faith in the offensive line. And I think you see that by the dancing he's been doing. There were some clips out last week where holes were there. He just wasn't hitting them. And I think that he's been so accustomed to, either holes not being there and him thinking that he has to do it all himself, or getting hit in the backfield so often. I believe he got only like 5 yards before contact last game. Of his 22 yards, only 5 of them came before contact, which is just insane. That even when there now are holes, he's not trusting them, because, one, like you said, he doesn't look as explosive as he did last year. And 2, the offensive line has played so poorly this year that he just doesn't. He's looking to do it all himself. He's not putting his trust in the offensive line that he did last year. So, and I think you started to see that last week. He was dancing so much last week. I felt like I was watching LaShawn McCoy, back when he was an Eagle, of just the running, north or east and west instead of running north and south. So I think Saquon just needs to get back to trusting his offensive line, get back to, just going where the play is designed, hitting those holes, and trying to make guys in the second level miss. Because right now, the dancing and the not being able to get anywhere before you get to the line of scrimmage, it's just all a bad combination. So yeah, I think that's where we're at with it. I think that's the why of what's been going on. Because for 12 games, if you haven't been able to rush the ball, then you're going to start to lose faith in those guys up front a little bit, and especially with some backups that we have in there now.
All right, let's look ahead to this week's game against the Chicago Bears. Is this the first ever Eagles game on a Friday? I think so. I don't.
It's the first ever Black Friday game, but maybe during like COVID or something like that.
I don't remember. I don't remember if they've ever. I can't remember if I ever saw anything. However, that's not our trivia question this week, because I don't even know the answer. However, the trivia question this week, and this, I feel like this is the week I finally get you guys. I gave Matt a really hard one last week. It was like the only Eagle, the only player ever to have 2 100+ yard interceptions against the same team. It was an Eagle. It was just like, it was a wild question. I don't know how he got it. However, this is a tough one. Our trivia question this week, the 1970 matchup between the Bears and Eagles remains the only NFL game to be played on what college campus?
All right. So I feel like this question was a little bit unfair just because you didn't give me who the home team was. So I had to think. I was like, I felt like if I had the home team, I would have been able to guess better.
However, I'm not giving you anything because.
But you're trying to make it really hard, so I understand. So you want me to give the answer now? My answer now?
We're gonna wait to do the answer a little bit later in the show. However, I think you can. I mean, you can narrow it down to a couple colleges. 1970. One college in Philadelphia plays at the played at that time at Veteran Stadium. So you can kind of narrow it down. The Eagles played at a college field in 1970 as well. So if you think about Franklin Field, Penn, so all right. So we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that question. I mean, I'm just like so desperate to get one of these right. I'm going to give you guys some impossible stuff now. I mean, if the Eagles are going to keep playing bad, I'm going to get angry. So I'm just going to give you harder questions. So it's my way of taking my anger out. Anyway, let's go back to the run game. This feels like a week it could open up, Sam. Am I delusional? Yeah. This feels like it could be a week. The Bears are without 3 starting linebackers today. TJ Edwards, former Eagle, Noah Sewell are both out, and Tremaine Edmonds is on the IR. So the Bears are really thin at that position. Their defensive line ranks 29th amongst all teams. Like, is this really? Could this be the week we see another 100-yard game from Saquon, or are we delusional and this is just a lost cause and the Eagles are never going to go anywhere?
Yeah, I think I'm at the point where I need to see it to believe it first. But I do think that the matchups do really favor the Eagles running game this week for sure. Like you said, the linebackers being out is huge. For us, having them have 3 linebackers out is pretty crazy. And like you said, their defense is 29th against the run. So, it definitely is something that could happen this week. I do think that it's definitely with the cold weather today. Everyone made such a big deal of that the last couple games of the Eagles played outside. So I do think the Eagles are going to try to establish the run today. I really hope that I really hope that they include some different running backs, because if Saquon's not working, we have seen in very limited sample sizes that Tank Bigsby has been able to pick up yards. It was crazy. Right before the bye week, he had that 100-yard game against the Giants, and then we just barely see him ever again. It seems like Saquon had that huge game against the Giants as well, and they thought, okay, well, Saquon's back. We're just going to ride him again to the playoffs, and that hasn't happened. So, Tank seems like every time he gets in there, and this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, Tank just gets the ball, hits the hole, and, it is what it is. There's no dancing with Tank. He's just going to go out there and run the play that's called. So I think that, that's something that Saquon can kind of look at a little bit. It's just, hey, run the play that's called. Eventually those holes are going to open up. Last year, one of the biggest things for the Eagles was their running game was good in the first half, but not great. But Saquon had so many of his rushing yards in the fourth quarter. The Eagles were the best fourth quarter rushing team last year because they just wore down the other team's defensive lines, and they stuck with the run, and then eventually he was able to pop a few big fourth quarter runs to win some games. So, I'd like to see them trying to go back to that again today. And yeah, I mean, I would mix in some Tank Bigsby. Will Shipley, I'm not really a fan of. I'm not a huge fan of his, but Tank Bigsby definitely shown that whenever he gets the ball, he seems to make something happen with it. So I definitely try to get him some more carries. But yeah, if there's going to be a game where it's going to turn around, it's going to be against a team that has their three of their linebackers not playing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Tank Bigsby. Last week he had just one rush, and it was for 8 yards, and that was the longest rush by an Eagle last week, was 8 yards, and it came from Tank Bigsby, who had just that one. I don't understand how you go away from that, but you try to install some faith in Saquon, where it just feels like you're not going to get anything at this point. So
Yeah.
is that the key? Like, at one point, are you just like, you're going to have to – are they going to have to split time eventually? Like, what is the dynamic here with Tank Bigsby and Saquon? Like, you're going to have to see Tank. Great name, by the way. You're going to have to see Tank today, right? We're going to have to see him out there.
Yeah, I mean, eventually the Eagles got to stop just ramming their head into the wall with Saquon and not getting anything out of it. They've got to try to mix it up at some point. You traded for this guy. You traded for this guy to be a kick returner for whatever reason. You know, he never returned kicks in his life. And it didn't work out, but he showed that when he gets the ball, he can be dynamic. And he's also shown that in the past in the NFL. It's not like this is a guy they picked up off the streets. This is a guy who, in Jacksonville, played very well while Trevor Etienne was injured. So, you know, he's someone that's shown that he can do it in the NFL. And it just, 11 rushes last week is just not enough, even though it wasn't working. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be a scenario where they ever are going to be 50-50, but, I mean, if you can get to 80-20, I think, just change it up a little bit, get a little change of pace. They did it so many times with Gainwell last year, and Gainwell was really good in that role, and we see what he's doing in Pittsburgh now. So, I think definitely they have to stop just ramming their head into the wall with Saquon every time if it doesn't work, and try to get some other guys out there who can be a little bit more dynamic at the moment.
Gonna have to see it, and no more Will Shipley on third down as well. That typically does not seem to work. The Chicago Bears are third in the NFL with 6 comeback wins this season. They just find ways to win. Like, the numbers they have aren't amazing. They just come back and win. And the Eagles last week, they let up and let Dallas get back in that game. Obviously, blew that 21-point lead. That can't happen against any team. Certainly cannot happen tonight against Chicago, because Caleb Williams and the Bears offense, Ben Johnson, they will make you pay. What can the Eagles do offensively and defensively to make sure that does not happen?
Yeah, I talked about earlier how I thought that the kind of narrative out there that the Eagles took their feet off the gas just wasn't true. They just played really bad football. Jalen was bad. The running game was bad. Penalties, turnovers, everything that could have gone wrong in that second half for the Eagles did go wrong in that second half, and obviously it allowed Dallas to come all the way back and win that football game. So, like you said, the Bears are comfortable being down. They have no problem being down, even a few scores, going into the fourth quarter. And the Eagles are a team that has blown a couple of those leads this year. You look back at the Broncos game. Obviously, they came back from 17 down, 21 down last week. So it's something the Eagles have definitely done. And, this is just going to have to be a game where you have to play a complete 4 quarters of football. The Eagles have been not great in halves this year. Their offense is so inconsistent. Their defense has been inconsistent at times. You look at a game like the Rams game. They were horrible in the first half, came back in the second half and was awesome, ended up winning that game. So this is a game where you're going to have to play, finally put together a full 4 quarters of football, because if you let this Bear team hang around, they'll hang around and they'll come back and they'll beat you, because, like I said, they're comfortable in those scenarios. So, I think the biggest thing from the defensive standpoint is to take advantage of mistakes. Last week, obviously, the Eagles got that interception by Nakobe Dean that was called back. It was a terrible, terrible, terrible call by the officiating, because Dallas subbed, so the Eagles should have been allowed to sub, and they weren't allowed to sub, and it was ridiculous. I don't know how more people haven't been talking about it this week about how the officiating completely screwed it up on such a huge play in that game. But Zach Bond dropped an interception last week. If Caleb Williams is going to throw an interception, you've got to come down with it. And then also on the offensive side, you got to make them pay, because he will make some mistakes. He will make some very stupid plays, but he also can make some great ones too. So, if you get a chance to flip a game on the defensive side and make a play, you got to come down with that interception. You got to come down with that fumble, the sack, whatever it is, because a few times last week in Dallas, they didn't do that, and we just let them hang in, and they were able to come back. So, The Chicago team is a never say die team, so take advantage of the mistakes when they have them. And offensively, even if you're not scoring, on every drive, obviously, at least put together good enough drives where it's not 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, and the defense is on the field nonstop, because that's when it starts getting sloppy on the defensive side of the ball.
I feel like last week the Eagles let Dallas get back in the game just basically because the number one factor of when you have a lead is typically you just hand the ball off and try to chew clock. The Eagles can't do that. I mean, they didn't do that. They didn't even really try to do that, which is an issue in itself.
It just shows that the coaches don't trust it. It shows the coaches know that they just can't trust the running game right now, which it stinks. It stinks.
What do you think about Nick Sirianni and Kevin Patullo, how they run this offense? It's been the number one discussion. Now people are opening their eyes more at Nick Sirianni with the offensive involvement. Who are you kind of pointing fingers at here on the coaching side, or is this just on the players?
Yeah, I do think the number one is always the players. I think that and also when you look at it, you gotta go straight to the quarterback. He's the most important player on the offense, and he gets all the praise when they win, so he needs to get a lot of the blame when they lose. And I think what a lot of people refuse to believe is that the Eagles, in my opinion, run the offense they do because they think it's what's best for Jalen. And I think at this point, while it has worked in the past, you have to be willing to switch it up. 2017, the Eagles offense was obviously awesome with Carson Wentz, but they couldn't run the same offense with Carson Wentz as they did Nick Foles. So in the middle of the season, they changed how their offense was ran. They went to the RPO style offense, and obviously that played a lot more to Nick Foles' strengths. The reason I use that example is because I think right now they're playing to what they believe is Jalen's strengths. Not throwing the ball over the middle of the field, not taking a lot of intermediate throws, throwing short, throwing deep, that kind of stuff. I think that they need to try to implement some more over the middle throws, some more intermediate routes, some more complications into the offense, and see how it goes. What do they? If Jalen starts turning the ball over like he did when they used to run this stuff back in 2023, early 2024, then you can go back to what you were doing before. But when you have an offense that is incapable of running the football, you need the passing offense to carry you. And right now, they're still playing the passing offense as if they have that great running game. They have been unwilling to change their passing offense to be the main point of their offense that needs to carry them. This passing offense is fine when you have Saquon Barkley going off for $152 touchdowns every game, being conservative. Okay, Jalen has shown in the past when he throws the ball more, he turns it over more, all that kind of stuff. That's fine, but we have no running game right now. So in my opinion, they need to switch, become a pass-first offense in mentality, and open up the playbook a little more and see if Jalen can do it. You pay Jalen Hurts all this money. You say he's a top 5 quarterback in the league. You tie the franchise to him, and rightfully so. He won us a Super Bowl. Then give him more responsibility on his shoulders and see if he can handle it. If he can't handle it, then at least he can't handle it. But right now, we're playing conservative, as people like to say. I don't think they're playing that conservative, but people like to say they're playing conservative because they're afraid of what he's going to do if they open it up more. But the only way to know is if you try it. So I'm willing to have my $50 million quarterback try to do all these extra things. Try to have motion, try to throw the ball over the middle of the field. If he can't do it, then he can't do it. And like I said, you can always revert back. But I just don't like, that's my biggest complaint on the coaching, is that they have been unwilling to let their quarterback kind of see if he can do these things instead of just determining he cannot. And I know that he hasn't been able to do it in the past, so that's why they are not allowing it. But if you want to win the Super Bowl this year, it's not going to be on the running game. It's going to be on Jalen Hurts' shoulders. And, another thing, too, with Jalen Hurts is I understand that he gets hurt every season when he runs football more, but that is such a dynamic part of this offense. He's obviously not the same runner as he was when he first came out of college. Looking back to how he runs now, but he's still dynamic enough to be able to pick up first downs. Let's see some more design runs with Jalen. Let's see moving him out of the pocket a little bit. Let's try some of these new things or some of these things that we've done in the past to try to open up this offense more because as it is right now they were winning, but as of last week they're not winning anymore. So that's my long rant, I guess you could say. But I think they just need to let Jalen Hurts see if he can do these things. And like I said, if he starts turning the ball over, dial it back again. But I think the first thing they need to do is let him use his legs more because they always do it in the playoffs. It opens up the offense and it opens up the running game as well. But right now they're just being way too conservative with him in that aspect because they're afraid of him getting hurt.
Just in life, it's better to try new things and figure some things out. People do it every single day. Like I had to do it earlier. I had to try out StreamYard on my phone because my computer crashed, but I was able to revert back to the computer because the app on my phone wasn't very good, and I was able to figure out my computer. Like the Eagles, if they want to try to advance this offense, they're going to have to try new things and go out of what is Nick Sirianni's comfort zone. And it feels like, we've talked about a conservative offense. However, you don't feel they play super conservatively. But Nick Sirianni's philosophy is don't turn the ball over and win the turnover battle. If you win the turnover battle, you're going to win games. While this is true, that leads to a boring offense that really primarily runs the ball. And when you don't have a running game, you got to go outside of the box a little bit. And that's what I feel like what we feel like the Eagles are kind of afraid to do here. And they have to do it, especially today against a really good Chicago Bears team.
Yeah, and I think they did this last year in the beginning of the season. They tried to put it a lot more on Jalen's shoulders, and he was turning the ball over like crazy. And they started the season 2-2. But I think at this point, while they are 8-3 and they want to keep going, and they want to go for that 1 seed. Like I said, they need to switch the mentality of this offense and think that. Okay, we need to have a dynamic passing game to carry us because we cannot run the football. And also teams are begging them to throw the football. If you watch the game last week, look at how many guys are up near the line of scrimmage just waiting for Saquon Barkley. Obviously the offensive line has really struggled this year because they were doing that last year as well. But still, just look at how many guys are up in the box just waiting for Saquon to run right up the middle at them, or off tackles or whatever it is. It'll open up everything if they let Jalen run, if they try to let him throw, more intermediate routes over the middle of the field, that kind of stuff. Like I said, he turned the ball over a ton when he did it before, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't have gotten better at it either. People improve. It was a year ago, a year and a half ago at this point now. So, we're not going to keep winning games the way this offense has been playing. So, yeah, I really think that they need to open it up. But the first thing I'd like them to do is let Jalen use his legs a little bit more.
Now, when I look at this Bears team, they confuse me. They're 8-3, but they rank 18th in point differential and 22nd in DVOA. For those who don't know, that's kind of like a weird stat where it's like it's defense adjusted value over average, which measures a team's efficiency on a play-by-play basis by comparing their performance to a league average baseline. And, they rank 22nd there, which is like kind of how you see how efficient a team is.
Yeah.
But they just find ways to win, which is like the Eagles do that, but they do it kind of in a more flashy way where the Eagles have all these stars and the Bears, you look at their offense, there's not a ton of star power. You got DeAndre Swift as the running back, former Eagle, DJ Moore as their wide receiver. The line is pretty good. And then you got Ben Johnson back controlling it as the coach, which is that what it is? Is that just Ben Johnson or Caleb Williams? Because he's not the best quarterback. He's not the best quarterback in his draft class. He's not the best quarterback in the NFC North. Like it's weird. It's weird. It's very weird how the Bears do it, but they win. And I don't know how.
Yeah, I think, the Bears right now are in the classic ahead of schedule. They were a team that got the number 1 overall pick a couple of years ago. And coming out, it was pretty obvious that Caleb Williams was the number 1 talent in that draft. It turns out, so far Drake May has been the better player, but Caleb Williams is still someone who has a ton of talent. And they were pretty bad last year, pretty bad season, fired their head coach. And they're on the classic, my quarterback is young, and he took a step forward, and we're also playing a terrible schedule. If you look at who the Bears have beaten this year, their best win is against the Cowboys. And while the Cowboys beat us last week, no one would say the Cowboys are one of the best teams in the NFL. Obviously, they're playing a lot better right now, but in the beginning of the season, they were really struggling, and that's when the Bears played them. The Bears have lost to the Lions this year. The Bears have yet to play the Packers. So while they are having a very good and impressive season, there's really not that signature win on their resume. I mean, they beat the Steelers last week. There's not really that top tier NFL team that on either conference that they've beaten so far this season. But at the same time, you can only play who's on your schedule. That is the benefit of playing a weaker schedule and having a quarterback and a new head coach who have elevated your franchise. So yeah, and like you said, they're a team that never says die. They have had a ton of comebacks. They're a team that knows how to win very close games. Their offensive line is pretty good. They can run the football decently. Rome Odunze has had a really good second season. Got a better year than DJ Moore so far. So yeah, I mean, Caleb Williams is a good quarterback. I don't think he's somebody who can. I don't think he's really reached his potential yet. Obviously, in just his second year, it looks like Drake May might have been the best quarterback to come out of that class, but that's still to be determined. But yeah, they've played a really weak schedule, so today will be a big test for them. But it also means they're going to be extra motivated because that's what everyone's saying about them is that, wake me up when the Bears beat a real team. Today they can put a real team on their resume if they come out and beat the Eagles today. So yeah, they're definitely a dangerous team. They're okay defensively, they're okay offensively, but like you said, they just find ways to win. So yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see, after us, how the rest of their season plays out because it's still Detroit. They have Packers twice, so we'll see how they can kind of end the season.
How would you assess the season that Caleb Williams is having? I read off his stats. He's got 2,500 yards, 16 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions, and his quarterback rating is 55.3. So a lot of those numbers kind of middle of the pack. However, he's playing winning football. I know it's not against the most high-class teams, but, he's not the best quarterback in this class, Drake May and Jane Daniels. Yeah. However, I don't know how I'm not a Bears fan, obviously, but if you're a Bears fan, how are you feeling about Caleb Williams 2 years removed from his draft?
Yeah, I think you'd have to be positive. I mean, the Bears have been searching for a quarterback for forever. So I think, I would feel good. He's definitely, like you said, he's been middle of the pack in a lot of the statistics, but I think the biggest thing that would encourage me if I was a Bears fan was that his interceptions are only at 4 so far this season. Last year, he was somebody who was relying a lot on God-given talent and was making a lot of mistakes. He was making some really boneheaded decisions, some Carson Wentzian mistakes, where he would be able to get away with that kind of stuff playing for USC, but he couldn't get away with it in the NFL. And I think that's a big thing that Ben Johnson has kind of gotten out of him. Not saying that he won't still do it. He's somebody who can make huge plays with his arm, on the move, off-scheduled plays. That is a big strength of his, but that also can lead to, as we know, with Carson Wentz, a lot of mistakes down the road if you don't pick and choose your shots there. So I would be encouraged if I was a Bears fan. I definitely would be looking around the league at what Jaden Daniels did last year and what Drake May, the MVP frontrunner, has done this year. But, he's definitely taken a positive step forward. And like I said, I think him minimizing the negative plays has been a big step forward for him this year.
On the Eagles defense, things are going to be looking a little bit different. Andrew Makuba has been placed on the injured reserve. He broke his ankle last week. It could be out for the season, so a big loss there in the Eagles secondary. And Sidney Brown will get the start back with Reed Blankenship tonight. Reed also banged up. A lot of injuries in that Eagles secondary last week. As you got Adoree Jackson left the game with a concussion. Reed Blankenship left the game. Makuba left the game. So a lot of things were going wrong back there. So we'll see what we can get from Brown tonight. And then Britton Covey was activated, and that will help the kick return because, Xavier Gibson made a pretty boneheaded mistake last week, fielding that punt at the 2-yard line, fumbled the ball. Dallas ended up not scoring. However, Eagles could have tried to maybe ice the game a little bit there. But, Covey has had success with the Eagles returning some kicks, so that'll be good for them. What are you expecting from Sidney Brown for the rest of the season? Is that what we're really looking at here? Or is Howie going to have to try to find something.
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems like it's probably going to be Sydney for the rest of the year. You look at Makuba's injury being placed on IR, basically takes him out for the rest of the year. I haven't seen if they've officially said that he's going to be out for the full year, but not good. He started to play better. He was rookie mistakes in the beginning of the year, but he had started to play better. And man, I'm very nervous about Sidney Brown back there. He is somebody who has not been very good. It seems like he injures a player every time he gets on the field. He injured Makuba. I think that he's somebody that Ben Johnson is going to pick on tonight. He's somebody who plays with his eyes sometimes more than his head. He's very reckless. He can give up some big plays. So yeah, I'm very nervous about Sidney being back there. Honestly, I think he's going to get picked on pretty bad today.
Xavier Gibson as well got injured on that fumble, so that's where Covey comes in, and he will be returning kicks for the Eagles. And this is the end of the Bears-Eagles alliance that has been going on all season long. The Bears beat all the teams in the NFC East. The Eagles beat all the teams in the NFC North. So now here we are with these two teams alliance. I think it was kind of a fun thing going on between Eagles and Bears, but it has to come to an end eventually.
Yeah, it's funny how both our Eagles and Bears social media teams kind of caught on to the joke and played on it this week. But yeah, we took care of the NFC North for them. They took care of the NFC East for us. So we appreciate each other. But it ends today. Hopefully, we can go 4-0 and be NFC North champions this year.
Nick Sirianni has never lost to an NFC North team as a head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. That we will see if that holds on today. All right, let's look at our inactives for the Eagles. Josh Uche is inactive for the first time this season, and then the rest are pretty self-explanatory. Sam Howell, Mac McWilliams, A.J. Dillon, Lane Johnson, Xavier Gibson, and Ty Robinson are out for the Eagles. What do you make of this Uche? They brought up Patrick Robinson. They elevated him this week, and Uche got Uche, whatever his name is, Uche got it sent to inactives list. Interesting.
Yeah, probably for special teams. Patrick Johnson, good special teams guy. He did have a sack this year, but I doubt they're going to be really playing him an edge rusher. So just probably a special teams move since Sidney Brown got taken off of special teams, I would assume, since now he's going to be starting. So probably just his replacement on special teams.
For the Chicago Bears, get ready for this name. I'm going to start it with quarterback Case Keenum. Mm-hmm. Remember him. You also got Tyro Stevenson. He's a defensive back. Ruben Hypolite, the second, is a linebacker. Dominic Robinson, defensive lineman. Wide receiver, hold on, his font is terrible. Jade Walker, Noah Sewell's a linebacker, and TJ Edwards also a linebacker. So you got a lot of linebackers on that inactive list for the Chicago Bears. All right, let's look at our notable matchups. Sam, what do you got? I'm going to throw out one. Two great football minds, Ben Johnson versus Vic Fangio. Today is going to be a very fun one to watch for me.
Yeah, it definitely is. Vic has done a great job as Eagles defensive coordinator. Ben Johnson, very creative. So it's going to be interesting to see what Ben has for Vic today and how Vic is able to, counter and make some adjustments at halftime. My two, I have Rome Odunze and DJ Moore versus whoever the Eagles' second cornerback will be. Obviously, Adoree Jackson is playing today. Is that correct? He wasn't on the inactive list. I believe he was taken out precautionary, but he is doing better, so he should be starting there. But Cooper really struggled on the outside when he went out there. I really don't like them moving him outside. I love him as a nickel, so hopefully if anything happens to Adoree, he's able to stay in there. But like we just talked about, Ben Johnson is going to try to get Rome and DJ Moore one-on-one with Adoree Jackson. Rome has had a really good sophomore season, almost 700 yards receiving already. And DJ Moore, I believe he's been injured a little bit this year, but we know what he can do when he's fully healthy. And then my second one's the Eagles offensive line versus the Bears defensive line. Shocker, it's the obvious one, but it is the biggest matchup of the game. Bears have a pretty decent defensive line, but like you said, not really good against the rush. And then if Saquon Barkley can somehow find a way to get into the second level of that defense, they are really hurting back there with all those linebackers out. So the Eagles really need to be able to finally establish the run with the offensive line, let Saquon get to the second level, and hopefully start to do his thing.
We will see how that works out. All right, our SeatGeek standout stars brought to you by SeatGeek. We're about 11 minutes away from kickoff, so we're going to try hurrying this up. SeatGeek is the easiest, most efficient way to get your tickets. Go over to SeatGeek. Use code Philly Sports Report. Take $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. It's Black Friday, so there's some other deals going on at SeatGeek, so make sure you go take care of that. Holiday season's coming up, and there's no better way to get some presents than going over to SeatGeek, where everyone likes a ticket. All right, Sam, give me 2 standout stars today for the Philadelphia Eagles or the Bears.
All right, I got 2 for you, both from the Eagles. My first one is Dallas Goedert. Goddard has been kind of missing in the last couple of weeks. He was leading the tight ends in touchdowns in the beginning of the season, but he has really fallen off recently. I think if Jalen and the offense and the coaches open up the middle of the field, Dallas should be able to feast on their backup linebackers if they utilize it. If they do, Dallas will have a big game and be a star of this one. And then one of the defense for me is Jalen Hunt. Like I talked about earlier, Caleb Williams loves to extend plays with his legs, try to get first downs, try to make big plays out of the pocket. Sometimes you can hold the ball on too long doing that and run around a little bit. And I think Jalen Hunt's going to come up with a big stack on the Caleb Williams extended play late in this one to help the Eagles hopefully get a victory.
All right, thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring the show and that segment. Our locks of the game: Eagles are -7 on the spread. Over under is 44.5. And Sam has some other locks. What are we thinking for today here on Black Friday?
Yeah, so I think, this is a big spread for 2-8-3 teams. I'm surprised the Eagles are this much favorites. It's opened at 7. It's stayed at 7, which is really interesting. People obviously expect a bounce back game from the Eagles. I have the Bears covering in this one just slightly. I don't love the Eagles as a touchdown favorite over anybody, and definitely not over an 8-3 Bears team. I have the under in this game just slightly, and then with my SeatGeek standout stars, I always like to back it. So I have Dallas Goedert. For whatever reason, I couldn't get FanDuel to work for me, so I don't have his over under, but I'm assuming it's pretty low. So I like Dallas Goedert, and then I also like Saquon to score today. I feel like we haven't seen Saquon score a touchdown recently. Maybe they give him a screen. Maybe they are finally able to get something going. But it feels like Saquon hasn't scored in a while, so I like him to get in the end zone today.
All right, here is our trivia question. The 1970 matchup between the Bears and Eagles remains the only NFL game to be played on what college campus? I'll narrow it down for you, Sam. The Eagles were not, technically, they were not the home team. So this game did not occur in Philadelphia, but it could have been anywhere else in the country.
All right, so my guess
Chicago. It could have been in California.
My guess was that the Eagles were the away team, so at least I was on the right track there. Tried to think about some colleges in Chicago that would have had football fields. Couldn't really think of any, so I went to the next closest college to Chicago that has a football field, and that is the University of Notre Dame.
We stumped them.
Come on, that was a good guess, though.
We stumped them. Let's go to 11-1. Let's go. The correct answer was Northwestern.
Oh,
yeah.
Damn.
So that now, and the Eagles are winning it by 40 now. Now we're feeling good. Thank you for getting that question on. That really that makes me feel good. All right, let's move on. Yeah, so Northwestern
out there.
Yeah, so I mean Chicago, Northwestern.
Yeah,
they don't have a field right now, so I mean it's kind of like it's kind of tough. All right, yeah, that's a tough one. Anyway, Foco is sponsoring our Foco Fit Check. Real fans need the best gifts. By Foco makes the most legendary gift for the most legendary fans. Foco, they got great gifts for the holiday season, so make sure you go over there and check them out. Eagles wearing their black uniforms tonight, so I'm wearing my black Jalen Hurts. Am I wearing this for the second week in a row? Maybe. However, it is the black game, so I have to sport the black jersey, and I might need Jalen black jersey. It seems like falling apart, but anyway.
So I also obviously am wearing the black jersey. I love the black jersey. Thank goodness I brought them out for Black Friday. And today I'm honoring the newest member of the Philadelphia Eagles Hall of Fame with a Malcolm Jenkins black jersey today.
There you go. Malcolm Jenkins going into the Eagles Hall of Fame today. And people don't remember like how good he was with the Eagles. He was the leader
Yeah.
of that Super Bowl team, first Super Bowl champion to be inducted into the Eagles Hall of Fame. Bucko Kilroy also going in. He was the member of the 48 and 49 championship Eagles teams. But the headliner to this weekend is Malcolm Jenkins. And you did a little piece on Jenkins. Go check that out on PhillySports.com. But I mean, Malcolm Jenkins was here from 2014 to 2019, and he was great. And things really went south when they got rid of him after that year because 2020 just such a bad year, a lot of trouble in the locker room as well. But Carson Wentz and some other things were going on because they didn't really have that leader that they had in Malcolm Jenkins. So Jenkins will always be remembered for that hit on Brandon Cooks, 100-yard pick six off Tom Brady. Just so many great moments with him, number 27 here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, he was a great player and an even better leader. You look back at those teams, and he was always the guy breaking down the huddle. I'll always remember the hype video the Eagles had before the Super Bowl, where it's all we got, we all we got, we need. The one game, him talking about how if they win this one game, they're going up in the rafters forever. Nobody can take that away from you. He was just such a great player for the Eagles and also a great leader and great in the community as well. Really, really big guy in the community, and really excited for him to get into the Eagles Hall of Fame. He definitely deserves it.
All right, our keys to the game. The Eagles are going to have to play a Malcolm Jenkins-style defense if they want to take down the Bears today, be a little aggressive and fly all over the place in their banged-up secondary. But how are the Eagles going to beat the Bears tonight, Sam?
Yeah, two quick ones because we're coming up on game time here. First is don't beat yourself. Eagles lost to the Cowboys last week, in my opinion, because they beat themselves with penalties, with missed throws, with turnovers, all that kind of stuff. Missed field goal at 1.2 as well that no one really talks about either. So do not beat yourself because this Bears team will take advantage and minimize Caleb Williams' off-scheduled plays. I think that if the Eagles are able to keep him in the pocket, they can be a true pocket passer. That is not really his strength. So try to minimize him running, him making plays with his legs, making plays with his arm outside of the pocket, and I think that you can really make him. He's not as developed as a pocket passer yet, so try to minimize him making off-schedule plays as much as you can.
The Eagles have turned the ball over just 6 times this season, which they had 2 of them last week, and the Bears have forced 24 turnovers this season, which is the most in the NFL. So you're getting a heavyweight battle in the turnover battle today. All right, what are we thinking? Let's give our predictions. Make sure to put yours in the chat if you got it. I mean, I don't feel great, but after getting that trivia question, finally getting able to stump, I'm feeling great. Eagles 24, Bears 20. Eagles bounce back. Not really super convincingly, but they get a nice victory here on Black Friday.
Yeah, I have a very similar score to you. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be another very close game. I have the Eagles winning this one 23-17, and then getting a few days off to go out to LA.
All right, thank you to all of you for tuning in to the Eagles pregame show brought to you by SeatGeek. Sorry for the technical difficulties in the beginning, but we were able to get it all sorted out. Make sure to check out PhillySports.com after the game and throughout the week as we will have our Eagles coverage. Follow us on social media to keep up with all the Eagles news, and throughout the game we'll be tweeting as well. We want to thank SeatGeek and Foco for sponsoring. Go get your holiday presents over at SeatGeek and Foco. Thank you all for watching and listening. Game today is on Amazon Prime, so try to go figure that one out. Go Birds!
Go Birds!